The teacher grades the last paper of the evening and notices something. For 30 years, she has written the same kind of comments. Not just corrections, but encouragement. You're thinking clearly here. This question shows real curiosity.
Try this approach next time. She never planned to change lives with red ink.
But former students still write to tell her those margin notes mattered more than any grade.
She understands what Posidonius taught the Romans, that legacy isn't built in monuments, but in the small choices we repeat until they become our signature on the world. Most people think legacy is what happens after we die,
something written on tombstones or carved in marble. But the ancient Stoic philosopher Posidonius knew better. Legacy is what we're creating right now, in this conversation, this decision, this moment when we choose how to respond to what life offers us. It's not the final chapter, but the daily sentences that form the story of who we are. Posidonius observed that people waste enormous energy planning for dramatic moments that may never come, while ignoring the ordinary moments that definitely will. They practice speeches for hypothetical award ceremonies, but never practice patience for actual traffic jams. They dream of heroic acts of courage, but avoid the small, brave choice to speak honestly in today's difficult conversation. Legacy isn't built in the spotlight, but in the shadows. In the 1,000 tiny decisions that no one else witnesses, but everyone eventually feels. The first principle of legacy building is understanding that character is cumulative. Every time you choose honesty over convenience, every time you extend patience instead of judgment, every time you act with integrity when no one would know the difference, these choices don't disappear, they compound. They build the foundation of who you become and how you move through the world. The parent who consistently listens without rushing to fix.
The colleague who reliably does what they promise. The friend who shows up during difficulties. These people create a legacy not through grand gestures,
but through reliable character. Consider the nurse who has worked the night shift for 20 years.
She doesn't cure diseases or perform surgery, but every patient remembers her calm presence during their worst fears. She brings water without being asked, explains procedures in ways that make sense, and somehow makes the hospital room feel less lonely.
She never made headlines, but she changed the experience of vulnerability for thousands of people. Her legacy lives in how she chose to use each 8-hour shift to practice compassion, when it would have been easier to practice efficiency. The second principle is that values must be expressed in action to become real. Seneca wrote extensively about virtue, but his students remembered him for how he treated his slaves, as human beings worthy of respect when Roman society said otherwise. His philosophy wasn't just intellectual exercise, but daily practice. You can claim to value honesty, but your legacy is built by how you handle the small lies that would make life convenient. You can speak about courage, but what people remember is whether you stood up when it mattered, even when the stakes seemed small. The businessman who built a company worth millions discovered this when he attended his father's funeral. Speaker after speaker talked not about his father's financial success, but about his habit of hiring people others wouldn't, of promoting based on character rather than connections. Janitor and the executive with equal respect. His legacy wasn't the money he accumulated, but the principles he practiced consistently, even when they cost him opportunities. His son realized he had inherited something more valuable than stock options, a template for how to build wealth without losing integrity. The third principle is that legacy ripples outward in ways we cannot predict or control.
Marcus Aurelius wrote his personal reflections, never intending them to be published,
yet his private thoughts about duty and acceptance have influenced leaders, artists, and ordinary people for 2,000 years. The teacher's encouragement of a struggling student leads to a scientist who makes breakthroughs that benefit millions. The parent's consistent modeling of curiosity raises a child who approaches problems with creativity rather than fear. We cannot orchestrate these ripple effects, but we can trust that consistent good choices create positive momentum that extends far beyond our ability to trace. The firefighter who responded to the same type of emergency calls for 30 years never knew which ones would matter most. But when the apartment building caught fire and families needed evacuation, his thousands of training hours and and hundreds of smaller rescues had built the muscle memory and calm judgment that saved lives. His legacy wasn't any single heroic act, but the cumulative effect of showing up prepared, staying calm under pressure, and choosing service over self-protection day after day. The families who made it out safely were benefiting from decades of small choices to practice excellence, even when the stakes seemed routine. The fourth principle is that legacy is built through what we refuse as much as what we pursue. Cato the Younger became legendary, not just for his virtue, but for his consistent refusal to compromise his principles for political advantage. Every bribe he turned down, every corrupt deal he walked away from, every shortcut he refused to take, these no decisions created space for integrity to flourish. In our own lives, legacy is often defined by the toxic conversations we refuse to join, the easy unethical choices we decline, the bitter attitudes we choose not to nurture. What we consistently reject shapes us as powerfully as what we consistently choose. The artist who painted for 40 years without achieving fame could have become bitter about recognition that never came. Instead, she chose daily to focus on craft improvement, mentoring young artists, and finding joy in the process rather than the outcome. When a gallery finally featured her work, the paintings revealed decades of quiet persistence, technical growth, and genuine love for the medium. But her real legacy wasn't the late career recognition. It was the community of artists she had encouraged, the techniques she had developed and shared, and the proof that creative work has value independent of external validation. The fifth principle is that legacy requires accepting mystery about its ultimate impact. We cannot know which of our actions will prove most significant, which words will be remembered, which examples will inspire future choices in people we may never meet. This uncertainty is liberating, not paralyzing. It means we can focus on doing good work for its own sake, rather than calculating its legacy value. The parent teaching a child to apologize sincerely may be preventing future conflicts that will never happen. The manager who gives honest feedback may be shaping a leader who will create positive change in organizations yet to be formed. Posidonius taught that the wise person plants trees, knowing they may never sit in their shade. They build character, knowing they cannot control how it will be remembered. They choose virtue, knowing its full impact will remain hidden. This isn't about ignoring consequences, but about finding freedom from the need to manage outcomes we cannot control. When we release attachment to how our legacy will be perceived, we can focus entirely on making it worthy of whatever perception it receives.
The librarian who spent decades helping people find information never imagined that one of the children she guided to the right books would become a researcher whose work advanced medical treatment. The coach who emphasized effort over talent never knew that one of his overlooked players would carry that lesson into business, creating a company culture where persistence was valued over quick wins. The neighbor who consistently checked on elderly residents never realized that her example inspired others to form a community support network that lasted decades. Their legacy wasn't grand ambition, but simple consistency in small kindnesses. True legacy is autobiography written in actions rather than words. Every day we add pages to this story through our choices, our responses, our habits, and our refusals. We cannot control who will read this story or how they will interpret it, but we can ensure that each page reflects the values we actually believe, rather than the image we wish to project. Legacy is not about being remembered perfectly, but about being remembered accurately, as someone who lived according to principles, even when it was difficult, even when no one was watching, even when the benefit was unclear. The question is not whether you will leave a legacy. You already are. With every choice, every day. The question is whether that legacy will reflect the person you intended to become. Posidonius understood that we build tomorrow's world through today's character. Every moment of patience, integrity, courage, and compassion becomes part of the permanent architecture of reality. Your legacy is not what you will do someday, but what you are doing right now, in this ordinary moment that contains infinite potential for good. If this moved you, comment "The Citadel holds" below. It is our sign that you carry the philosophy with you. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.